I want to talk about visual perception and some visual hierarchy and how we are using colors and text and everything in hierarchy. Because visual hierarchy is like a king, because we are perceiving things. Our brain has the possibility to scan something at one glance and to quickly understand what's going on in this situation and where he can find something that he's interested in. So, for example, if we enter this room, our brain and our eyes is scanning this room and understands that it's some training room or some classroom, and quickly can understand that, for example, here is the desk for presenter and in the other spaces are the desks for listeners. So that's why visual hierarchy is really important thing to simplify our job of understanding something. So let's start from visual perception because visual perception is really quick thing. We have 5 senses, as you know, human senses, and the sense of sight is the fastest, and actually it has the same bandwidth as a computer network, and it's quite fast. This is a known, very famous infographic, which you can find on Information is Beautiful website. Even there's some book as well, Information is Beautiful, and there is really good examples of data visualizations. So let's take a look at 4 properties of visual perceptions really quickly, and then I will talk about Gestalt principles of perceptions, where we are using those visual principles, and those Gestalt principles we are all the time using in the design to create hierarchy. So this is the first principle. It's called emergence. Do you see something here? Dog. Yeah, because it's dog, Dalmatian dog. And so that's because we are trying to identify object first when we are seeing something. For example, you saw, and then we apply some name of this object. Like we are not seeing leg, another leg, we are not seeing head, and so we are not making conclusions that, oh, maybe it's dog, but we are trying to scan the entire shape and make the conclusion what we are watching. So, and have I something really important here? Yeah, we are perceiving things as objects, not as parts, and we are not grouping those parts together. That's why, for example, in this image, we can, at first glance, identify that it's a bottle of juice, and then we are starting to see some different fruits and understand that those juices are made with different fruits. And here, for example, before we start actually exploring those data, we understand that this visualization, this small visualization, is about elections, because we have this big election box. So how we are using this principle in the design? We are trying, as shapes are taking precedence to lesser details, we are trying to create those entire shape of something, entire visual of something for people to understand it really quickly. I will go into details when I will apply those principles to Gestalt principles and more detailed examples, but this is kind of overview. So another principle is reification. Because visual stimuli is so inconsistent, our eye tries to fill in the gap. Even if this image is not finished and it misses something, we can identify objects. For example, we can see here some triangle, which is not drawn actually, but we can see it because we tend to feel those missing parts of visuals. And even in text, when we read text, maybe you saw some fun test is that when you see text and actually there's not written something, but you read it anyway. So, and this is quite useful, and we are using sometimes white spaces, like negative spaces, so-called, to create those feelings of having something. And I want to say with this example that white space is a really powerful tool, and it doesn't mean that if we have white space, we don't have anything. White space is not anything. It's a really important tool that we can use for different goals. So this text example here, we can't see this E, but and D, but we still can read it. How we use it in the design. So as long as we have enough information to communicate an object, the user can feel the rest. It means that we should not, we should try to show really important things and not things that are useless for creating the whole picture. That's why, for example, if it means that we should concentrate on the really important things and to not show the things that are useless. And the fourth principle is multi-stability. Our brain cannot interpret the two objects together. So it should switch from one to another. This is a famous image of perception of Freud, if I'm right. And we can't see the two interpretations at the same time. Ours should alternate. So we should avoid some multiple interpretations in our visuals, because people will not be able to see both simultaneously. So let's start about Gestalt principles of perception. Did you hear somewhere the name Gestalt? In psychology, maybe, yeah. Yeah, and it's quite like well used in the design, because it's about perception. It's about how we perceive things, how we see things, and how we group things, or how we treat some things as separated or as grouped. So those are actually quite simple principles that we all already know maybe, but I have many cases in the design that when I'm watching to some design and I'm thinking that there are some spaces missing, for example, to group something, or there are many mistakes made in this area, and I really think that it should be told to remember all the time when you're doing something. So we are grouping objects that are close together. Our brain is doing that, and there is two main principles of grouping objects: by space and by enclosure. So here we are thinking, we have no any information, any additional information about those bars, but we understand that those bars are something together, it's separate, and something together, and it's separate as well. So, and we don't need to tell this, because we can show with spaces and make people understand which part is grouped and which is not. So another principle how we group things are enclosure. If we enclose some objects together, our brain takes it like grouped objects, similar objects. And for example, we are using this principle in texts, in arranging in general the blocks in the design. And with just space, just small space, we make clear that we should read it like this, but we should read this part like this, because there is bigger space here, and here is bigger space as well. Another example of, we are kind of just with space making clear the direction as well of reading, for example. It's really useful in texts. And what about enclosure? How we use it? For example, in this infographic, we had 4 blocks, and we grouped information in one group together with this enclosing border. So another example is to create some backgrounds to the grouped objects and make sense that, like, create feeling that they are together, and we can quickly understand that there is 9 different blocks. We use this principle also when we are creating a long infographic, and we are trying to separate some blocks from one to another. Sometimes we create this background, different backgrounds, and with this trick we are grouping blocks together, and we make people know that it's some another block. It's related to the another blocks, but it's something together, some subtopic, talking about subtopic. Similarity. So of course, when we are grouping things by enclosure and by space, we think that they are similar in some terms, but also we group things by color, by size, by shape, and by direction. If we don't have any information here, we can understand that those red bubbles are interpreting some one thing, and those green bubbles are interpreting another thing. It's same for size, for shape, for direction as well. So those are tools for us to differentiate. And for example, when we have data, we can add 2 different data, and we want to have some differentiation between them and to show users, instead of just putting labels there that all the red circles are for something and green circles from some another, sorry. You need much more time to read text than see this. So it's making easy to understand at first glance that here you have 2 types of data, for example, and here as well. You can choose as you want, like color, size, shape, or direction to interpret your data. For example, here we can clearly understand that those blue bars mean something similar, and those yellow bars for something another. So it's men and women, and when we see it, we can understand very quickly the proportions between men bars and women bars, and this different type of icons as well that do the same thing. And really important principle of Gestalt as well, the figure-ground relationship. We really perceive things as foreground objects and as background objects. So that's why background objects are more creating the mood and the emotions, and foreground objects are more detailed information about something. That's why our eyes see first the background and creates some emotion, some feeling, and some it makes ready to some story, and on the foreground images, he actually starts to explore the detailed information. For example, here we are trying to create this background about the topic. This infographic is about visa liberation, and we put some Europe monuments on it to create this mood. And here as well, it's about noise. and with background, you quickly understand, you quickly take this nonverbal message about the topic. And then you actually start to explore every single detail, foreground, objects and text and everything. So, ENCLOSURE, it's the same as I told before, that we tend to fill gaps, and I will show you later in the designs how we use them. But for example, yeah, this is a dog who's running, and actually, if our brain had not the possibility to fill gaps, it would be just dots, but we can identify object very clearly. And how we are using those principles in visual hierarchy. As I said already, visual hierarchy is really something important because, for example, on your website or on infographic or on any visual, when we see it, we should quickly understand where to find, for example, the titles, where to find detailed text, and we usually scan for news websites, for example. We usually scan only titles, and then if something is interested, we go in the deep and we explore the actual article, but we should be able to scan articles and to see where are the articles. So which object do you see first? Like which box? Big one. And which color? Purple. First group that told purple. Sometimes they are thinking, please, I don't know why, but so more big and more bright are things, we see them first. Yeah, when we create some visual, we use various elements of communication like images, text, and everything. And first we see really big objects, and then we see bright objects. But it depends on the portions as well, and I will show you later. But it's really important that if we want to make people see something, we should really do it big and bright and to create some focal points. But it depends also on direction of reading as well. For example, I think all of us, is here anyone Arab? Big language. Okay, so for example, our focal point is top left corner because we start reading from there. But for people who's writing from right to left, they have this focal point on the right side. And you see the example of design in English, and you are starting reading from here, from the left side. Look at me, and you have the most important thing placed on the left side. But in those examples, they start like logo is here, and they start reading. So natural focal point is on the right side. So we are. It's kind of there exists some natural focal points. Focal point is the place where you watch mostly, and when the place that you notice first. So there exist some natural focal points and some artificial focal points. Natural focal points for us is top left corner, but and for Arabic languages is top right corner. But we as designers sometimes create the artificial focal points, maybe in the center of visual, and we do it with size and with colors. So, for example, this is very, very old Soviet image, but it's quite good example of using those tricks to create direction of perceiving this image. Like, it has quite good hierarchy, actually, because with this red big triangle. It creates focal point that we notice first, and it has some direction because triangle is directional, and it indicates us that we should read it from here to here. And like, if you know Russian, you will understand that you read it like клинком красным пей белых. And you really, it's effortless to understand the direction of perceiving this. Yeah, I already talked about focal points. And do you know what's heat map? Everyone? No? So heat maps, did you see something like this? Yeah. Heat maps are something that it's kind of a way of visualization, something when we encode something by color, and where it's intense it goes to red, and when it's not intense it goes to green. Sorry. So, and we are using heat maps everywhere, but we are using heat maps also for understanding how people scan the image they are watching. So those are heat maps of scanning, and do you see here where there is only two types of information, just text and just input box? People scan it from the left side because we are reading it from the left, and it goes like vertically. But when we when we put some images, because images are so attractive to our eyes, so because images are attractive for our eyes, we created some another focal points. Of course, it's news website, and it's not much attractive, but and people read it from the left top side, but we created these focal points here, and somehow we made it like we distributed these focal points. And you know, we like scanning people's faces. That's why here we have focal points on faces, but the focal point of face of first left model is brighter, of course, because direction also plays his role on creating focal points. So this is some example of hierarchy in text, for example, and it makes really effortless to understand what to read first and what to read next. And here also some blocks. So how we are using images to attract eyes. Actually, we are just using images to attract eyes because we like images more than text, and we just make sure that our images are communicating the right story and the right thing. And we are using just when we are putting image on some visual, we are creating focal point with it. But as I told you, we are creating it with not only images, but with colors as well, and with places, and with direction, and with everything. This is an example of color, for example, and in this gray visual, this yellow color really attracts us. But what's going on when we have big and bright objects together? So actually, big objects grab attention more, but when it comes to colors, if color is really bright, it can take this, this attraction on itself. And we have the exactly same images, two images here, but I think you will see it first. And how more bigger is object and more colored with bright color, it's more likely to attract us. So it's not only about size. For example, we have the same colors here as well, but we see this anyway, because it's not big enough. And we can talk about size separately and color separately, but together, big and bright object is really something that is in the center of everything. Yeah, this is a use of coloring something and creating focal points. And hierarchy in texts are really, really important. And why? When we create some visual with graphic elements and images and everything, we are kind of enjoying watching it, but we are not enjoying watching text sometimes, most times actually. That's why we want to really be careful in creating hierarchy in texts to make it more easy to understand everything and to perceive the information through these texts. That's why we are creating these headings, subheadings, and we are using spaces in it. There exist some microspaces, macrospaces, and microspaces. And it means that when we are using those small spaces to divide some paragraphs or the title from the actual content text and something, they are small microspaces, but we are using big spaces as well, and I will show you later. But for example, here, it's much more easier to understand this text for us than the first text, because we have no any hierarchy. But it's not enough to use sizes to create hierarchy. In the text, we are also using different typefaces and different thickness of fonts. So I want to talk about really quickly about typography, white space, colors, and images. I made this presentation just about general things of design and how we are using them. And when I finish it, I really want you to ask questions about the specific things, because I really did not know what background and what skill set do you have, and could not create a universal presentation. So what about typography? Really useful and basic things that you should know. For example, in typography, there exists many types of fonts, but two most known types of fonts are serif fonts and sans serif fonts. I will show you sans serif fonts as well to understand more. So serif fonts are the fonts that have these small endings. Can you, for example, it has no. Can you differentiate? So, and they have their use. Actually, in 2017, in design trends, kind of serif fonts are really popular. But in general, when it's about big texts, we are not using serif fonts in paragraphs and in content text. Because when we are trying to read really long text, our eyes should not be distracted with small endings and with useless graphical things. That's why we are trying to use serif fonts as decorative fonts in the small text, in the titles, in some quotations and things like that, but not in the big text. But you know the difference. For example, in the books, before they already used serif fonts, because it's easier to read on the book the typed letters than on the screens. That's why we are trying, as reading on screen is more difficult, we are trying to simplify the visual things as typefaces and to use sans serif fonts more in big texts. So, and those sans serif fonts are more minimalistic, it's not distracting us, and that's why we are using it in the content text and big paragraphs. And some advices about typography, and those are advices like based on the situations in my real life when I see something and I really think, why did you do that? So sometimes people think that if they stretch the fonts and they fill their spaces with stretched fonts, it's okay, but it's not, because fonts design and creating fonts is separate science, and it has its own proportions and everything, and we should not do that, definitely. We should, if we want to use some different text fonts that have different proportions, we just should choose some another font and to not stretch. Yeah, about paragraphs. So, you know, it's quite hard to read long text when it's really wide, because when we read something like this and when we should break, maybe sometimes we get lost in it. That's why the advice in the design is to not make paragraphs too wide, because it's not easy for our eyes to read. It's the average number of glyphs of each glyph is called the one letter or one point or something. So average number of glyphs should be from 50 to 60, and it depends on the case, but it's like most popular advice to use to not use more than 50 glyphs per line. I lost one slide, I guess. Yeah, another advice how to make text readable is to have contrast on background, because you really can't see this quite well. It's horrible. It's even more horrible. And you can see texts that are in the contrast from background. I will say that to make text more readable, do not make line spacings too big. Is it clear? Okay. So about white spaces, which one do you like more? Obvious. Yeah. Oh, am I? So I don't know why, but in the 90s in web design there was trend to not have any white space. They were thinking that a white space is something useless, and if you used white space, you lost some space. And now it's really popular to use white spaces, and it's quite good because our eye needs some space to concentrate on something and to have possibility to breathe to this object. Okay, I have some yellow slide here, and it's written that white space is not always white. So we can create white spaces with some different colors and with some background images. When I show you the image of Without Liberation, and there was some Europe monuments on background, it was also white space because it was not bright. It was perceived by us as background, and it was creating some space for foreground objects. And for example, which one do you like more? It's not only about grouping some objects in white spaces. And when I was talking about micro white spaces and macro white spaces, it's like example of macro white space, like big space that is making some object to breathe and to make us concentrate on the centered object. And those small white spaces are micro white spaces that create some grouping or separating perception. Yeah, and how to, we are using the space all the time to create blocks. We are using some enclosure, as I told, we are using some distance to group, and those distance actually, those spaces are creating this feeling. And I have all the time the, is there any marker? The cases when people put, for example, I really want to show you, can I, mark erim indaho. So I just wanted, I already told you that it's something kind of obvious, but really, really often people don't pay attention to it when they are creating something. Because when I have to see some beginners' designs, the most frequent mistakes are like that, like not using white space correctly. For example, if you place this closer to it, you may not differentiate those things. Or if you don't enclosure this thing and you just add another block on it, maybe you will not understand that this part is with this group and not with another group, which is next. So let's continue and then, yeah, and for example, this is one of our, not my, but my friend's work, and I think that it's too loaded with information and it misses some white spaces, but we had another possibility in this case, but still it's more attractive for us to see this visualization maybe because of white spaces, because our eyes is not too loaded and it has space to read and to see objects and to perceive those shapes and everything than here, because then you really need to go into details to understand what's going on it. And here it's much more easier to know where to find some statistical information, where to find this title and image and everything. For example, colors create emotions. And sometimes we need colors to create some emotion. For example, we want to create some emotion of danger with red, or we want to create some emotion of ecology with green and, oh, cool. So, for example, in this visualization, we used colors to code the ideas, to encode the ideas behind something. For example, we are using colors for encoding really often. And for example, in this case, we use this green to encode the information that this car is some eco car. And to encode the thanks, but I'm already talking about colors, but I will go back later to this white space topic. So we encoded this with black to make people know that this exhaust is something bad. And that's how we are using colors. And I want to show you a really funny example of this, but with not correct colors, I would say, because you know, when you see this first infographic, you don't need to read somewhere that it's eco car and this exhaust is not really good. Another information also creates these messages. Oh, it's in Georgian, and here is written that in Georgia, 71% of air pollution is caused by cars' exhaust. And you don't need to tell that this exhaust is black, because this exhaust is not good. So you just code it, encode it with some color, and it's already clear. But in this example, how do you know that it's eco car? Maybe you don't. And it's like conserving some space for us and some text use for us to encode some things with colors and to create nonverbal messages really quickly. This is the example of some using colors on websites, and it's clear at first glance that it's something wagon and green and like this. So, you know, in colors, there exists cool colors and warm colors. You everyone know? So, warm colors are more close to sun, like red, yellow, orange, and cool colors are more close to night, like blue, like green, but it depends on shade of green, actually. If it's more closer to yellow, then it's warm color. And how we are using those cool and warm colors. When we want to create some warm emotions, we are trying to use warm colors. It's obvious. And we are not trying to create some warm emotions and we are creating some cool emotions. We are using cool colors. But when we are using them together, as you can see, warm colors are more dominant than cool colors. For example, in this case, it's not advised to use them together, but in general, this is an example for realizing how dominant is warm color. So do you see this case? You kind of have the feeling that this red is on top and this green is deeper. Do you have this feeling? And you have the same feeling here that it's background and it's foreground because bright colors are more dominant, and that's why warm colors are more dominant, and that's why we are when we want to create some focal points, we are using more warm colors. But it's about contrast as well. For example, on white we can use some cool color as well and create focal point. But in general, if we have warm colors and cool colors, we should know that warm colors are more dominant and to use them accordingly. And we are also using text, using colors in texts and in backgrounds and in creating contrast. And we really want to create contrast when it's about text, because here we have big contrast and it's easy to read something. Here it's like average contrast and we can read it, but it's not so comfortable. So if it's only one sentence, then it might be okay if colors fits well, but if it's about big text, which we should read a long time, we really don't want to do something like this, and we should create big contrast, and it's nonsense. And I want to show you some tricks how to create contrast when we have text on images, and it's really famous problem in design to have images and we need to put text on it. So one of tricks to put text on a colorful image and to create contrast is to have some object on top of this image and to put text on it. And another trick is to have some transparent layer on top of the image, and it kind of creates one shade of all the image, and we can choose the color of font accordingly to create contrast. But this image is not so colorful anymore when we put it one transparent layer on top of this image. So those are two most famous tricks of putting text on really colorful images. Because, for example, it's really hard to read it, but it's easier to read it, and it's the same here and here. So how to choose the color scheme? I'm not going to explain you really scientific ways of choosing colors, but I'm going to tell you also 2 or 3 tricks how to choose colors really easy, because maybe I thought that you are not designers, you just want to use design principles in your work, and it will save you some time to use tricks. And even me as designer, I'm using those tricks because it really saves me time. So one way is to take photo or to explore in the internet something that you like. For example, this image. And then to pick colors from it, to create color scheme for your work, with color picker to see what colors it has, and to use the same color scheme for your work. It's not plagiate, don't worry. There exists like millions and billions color schemes, and you will not be able to create your own color scheme. So it's really popular trick in design to see something, maybe even not the graphic design work, but some image of nature. For example, you are designing something about nature, and to take some nature photo and pick colors, some colors, and create color scheme for your work. And another trick is to create online resources that are, I will send you this presentation to all for those links and everything if you need. And of course, yeah, you are registered to this, yeah, so it's not a problem. I want to show you those. How many of you used online color schemers? Yeah. So for other people, I will show you some of them. And there exists many, many, many color schemer tools online. Those are my 2 favorites, but you can find any and which one suits for you. So the one type of color schemers are like this. You can browse the ready palettes, and when you like something, you just choose it. Do you know what's, for example, you have color codes, and you can just copy them and use in your design. How many of you knows what's those codes and how to use them? So, yeah. How many you don't know how to use them? Okay. I will explain. So, there exists many ways of creating colors, but the 2 most popular color creating schemes are RGB and CMYK. And what's the difference? So, I will search to provide more visual example as well. So it means on the screen, all the screens, like screen color is made with 3 colors: red, green, and blue. And we are using RGB code for screen colors, and we are using this SMIC colors for printing. Because in printing, they create colors with those 4 colors. It's like taking 3 inks and like putting it together in some portions and to have another color. So when we are designing something for the web or for the screen, we are using RGB type of creating colors, and when we are designing something for printing, we are using this SMIC. It's just when you open your file in some graphic design program, you can choose what color type do you want. Maybe I will show you to understand. I can move it. Yeah, here you just indicate what color mode you want. If you are, and actually it's not only in graphic design, you can do it in Word, I guess, as well, and in presentations as well. But you should remember that they are a bit different. For example, if you print some material created with RGB colors, it might be a bit different while printing, because they are creating colors with another sub-colors, or I don't know how to say. So yeah, this was an example. So red, green, blue. And you know what's the difference? In RGB, if you use everything in the same portions, you have white. But in SMIC, you have black. It's like I don't know how to say. It's additive. Yeah, it's additive to each other, yeah. So what I was talking about. Yeah, about those codes. So most of the codes here we have in RGB because they are for screen, but you can easily change it to SMIC. But what's this hex code of color? It's most universal code of the color. It's a hex. It calls hex code of the color. It's actually almost the same as RGB. First two digits are for red. Second two digits are for green, and the third two digits are for blue. You really don't need to remember that. Its structure is like from 0 to F. Each digit can be from 0 to F. It means that FF is the biggest portion of red, for example. 0, 0 means that we don't have any green in this color, and 1, 1, for example, means that we have really little portion of blue. So, and what do you think? What color is F, 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 F? White. Yes. And what color would be 0, 0, F, F, 0, 0? 0, 0, FF, 0, 0. Green. Yes. And for example, for this, you can't really say at first glance what color is it, but you don't need it actually. This code is just for copying and to having the exactly same color everywhere. You just copy it and you paste in some different programs where you have colors in Word, in PowerPoint, in Illustrator, in Photoshop, everywhere. You can, almost everywhere, you can put this hex color or you can put RGB color. But sometimes RGB are separately, like you should paste R, then G, then B. I will show this as well to be more clear. So. And this is color picker of Illustrator, for example. You can paste this hex code here, or you can switch it to RGB and put the R here, G here, and B here. And you will have exactly same color that is on this, in this color scheme. So that's how we just copy the exactly same palette. So sometimes some online color schemer tools have also export of all the colors, and you can just import in your file and have all the colors. But if you liked this color, you can just copy its code, and you have the exactly same color. And I differentiate those two resources by simplicity, kinda, because I think it's more easier to use this resource than this, but it depends on case as well and on your taste, and it's more free, you know, and it's quite useful when you know that you should use some green for sure. For example, you have one color and you want to choose some another colors what fits well with this. So you can, for example, this, you know that you should use this color for sure in your design, and you can lock it. It's locked now, and you can just tap space, and it's providing some different colors. And if, for example, you liked this color, you can lock this as well and continue exploring. And it's more up to you to create your color scheme in this resource, but sometimes it's really useful because even it's more custom, I would say, and it has this possibility of moving. For example, we are not going to use those two colors together, but we want something in the middle of them, and that's why we are continuing to. But if we know for sure that we are using them together, then we can place them in the middle and continue to choose some another colors. For example, we liked it, we can lock and continue, and we can create our color scheme ourselves. It's a bit harder because it's more, it depends more on our taste, but it's more custom. And how to copy codes from here. Yeah, you can copy a hex code from here, and you can see RGB, SMIC, or some another codes for this color here. It means that, where it is? Here we had some switcher, but where it goes? Okay, anyway, you can copy colors, and even you can see shades of this if you want to like have this color, and maybe in your charts you want to use shades of this color to indicate. You want to have all the bars of your bar chart in one color, but with different shades to create this kind of heat map situation, like brighter is more intense data and lighter is less intense data. So you can see shades here. And let's continue. Is everything clear with colors, or you have some questions?
I have a question. For example, in infographics, how many colors we can use?
So in infographics, you can use so many colors that you may imagine, but the most difficult thing of using many colors is to make them look cool. It's really hard, actually. More colors you have, it's harder to choose colors the way they are really looking good together. You are not like you can use so many colors that you want, but it depends on how you're using colors and how you're choosing together some colors. You don't have any limit, just it's about you. If you're choosing colors very well and they look together really well, you can choose so many colors so you want.
I have a question. It's more about the fonts. This is the same question about the fonts. How many fonts we can use? And the second one is how to say bilingual thing when you are writing on the, for example, Georgian and English. How to.
Okay.
Can I add also what is the font size of main title, subtitle, and a body text?
I would say that you can make title and subtitle size that you want, but for content text, advice is to use 16 pixel font because it's just advice. It doesn't mean that you should not use like 16 pixel size font is already good for eye to perceive and to read text in the content text. But you can use even 18. It depends on your visual style and design. You should not use too big fonts because it takes more space, and in content you don't need to spend really big space, and even for eye it's not comfortable to read really big glyphs, big typefaces. But yeah, the advice is 16. It's average. For subtext and what?
So title, subtitle.
Yeah. So as I already told you, for title, it should be bigger than your content text, but it's not any advice on size. It depends how you want to emphasize this title, for example. If you want it really, as I told in hierarchy, big objects create some focal points. So if it's really, really important, you can it as bigger as you want. You can make it. But in general, it should be just bigger than content text and bigger than subtitle. It's about hierarchy, like title, subtitle, content, and some notes. Yeah, average size for content is 16, but for title, maybe if you have 16 in content, you can have 24 in title, for example. So, and your question was?
My question was how many fonts we can use, and the second was about this bilingual.
Yeah. So for fonts, it's almost like colors. It's different, but sometimes if you are, it depends on your goal. If you are creating some website, for example, with loaded with some content, it's better to not use more than 2 different typefaces. But if you are creating some graphic design and your design is typographic, you don't have any images. As I show you the example of card, business card. Do you remember? Yeah, there was many typefaces. If you are creating typographic design in graphic design, not in web, then you can use many fonts, but you should be careful choosing them. Really, as in colors, for example, more colors you use, more difficulties to look them good together. It's same for fonts as well. And it's also another science of using together many fonts, because it depends of thickness, of type of fonts, of there exist many types of fonts besides this serif and sans serif. And what about bilingual? We are always trying to choose the same looking font both languages. Sometimes some fonts have the both encodings, and if you find this font is super. For example, for English and Russian, there exist quite good fonts, and even really popular Open Sans, and some popular fonts has Cyrillic support as well. In Georgian, it's a bit harder, but we are already always trying to choose fonts that are looking quite similar. Not very similar, but we are trying our best. Oh, yeah. So I will talk a bit about images as well. So we are creating and we are putting images in infographics and in websites and everywhere to convey some text visually, to create emotion, to create mood, to create some nonverbal message. It has many purposes, and to differentiate, there kind of exists 3 or 4 type of different visual visuals in general, visual images. So it's illustrations, it's photos, and it's icons mostly. So we are. It's up to you to use illustrations on or photos. It depends on your goal as well. But for example, here it's just illustration. We could use photo of someone listening to the music in the earphones. But in this case, we just created the illustration. But the one purpose of using illustration here instead of photo is to create this background sense, because here this illustration is really in the background. It's not foreground object. It's creating some additional message that it's about listening to the music in the earphones, how harmful it can be. And if we use some photo, and I will say later as well why we are trying to not use photos. Sometimes we don't want to make too personal something. If it's just general image of some idea, we are trying to use some illustration or some icon or something instead of using the photo of actual person, and to not personalize our visual too much. And what about photo? This is one infographic, for example. It's about gender gap in STEM, like in science, technologies, math, and engineering. When I was thinking about this infographic about gender gap and that they are like in STEM, there is really big gap in women labor force. And this data is about how girls are as successful in school in technical subjects as boys. So I decided to take those pictures to show the alternative of young girl, how she can choose between 2 different things, and then she can be successful in both. I will show you the entire infographic. I think it will be better. Why? So this is about girls' possibilities in science, technology, engineering, and math. And here we're showing the average school exit exam results for girls and boys in Georgia, and they are quite similar. Even girls are higher sometimes. And we also had data about how they was perceiving their self in those fields. For example, girls' self-attitude was lower than boys, and even teachers was like encouraging more boys in those subfields than girls. And that's why we just came up with this solution of create photos and to create three different things and to show alternative that girl also has the alternative in his life to choose different things, to be housewife or engineer, to to cry on something or repair itself, and to be model or to be some chemist. And it's some additional, like these photos are creating some additional emotions and some additional information for users. And it's reinforcing the data that we are showing. And what about icons? We are using these small icons for different, for encoding different things. And what's really good in using icons is that sometimes we even don't need those labels to icons. And even if we need labels in one visualization, in the one infographic or one website, when we define some icons in one place, we can use them in another place with labels and to conserve some space. And there exists things like that in mostly web design, but in design in general, like affordances. When something gives, like, let us know what it is for. And there exists some paternal affordances, and icons are something like paternal affordances. We are used to understand that some mail, like some paper airplane means send button, send icon, and we are used to understand that some like envelope means email, and that's why using icons is really useful. We are creating visual information, and sometimes even we don't need labels, and we can create just save space for something another, or we put labels on one place, and then if we reuse those icons into the same visual, we can not include the labels. And also we create icons that are illustrating some situations. It's quite hard, you know. Sometimes it needs to think about some abstract thing and to create some very concrete icon for this idea. So creating illustrations and icons for ideas is quite hard, but you can still explore or imagine how you would explain this idea with some visual image and illustrations. For example, here is about equality in family between men and women, and they are together, like putting this weight. Yeah, I told already about this, that we are kind of avoiding to use very personal images, and we prefer to use symbols. And those are really good resources for you. This is about icons, images, and some other resources really you can find here, even ready PSD files for some design and reuse it, some mock-ups, some image of some drone laptop, for example, and put into its screen something. Sure, I will send you the presentation, yeah. And you will see, we can explore as well. How many of you knows what's vector images? So, how many of you are interested what vector images is? So, there exist two ways of creating some images on the screen. It's raster and vector. And there exists raster images and vector images. And what's the difference? First of all, I want to tell you that you can create yourself vector images in programs like Illustrator, Corel, Draw. What programs are you using? Inkscape? Do you know Inkscape? No, then we don't need it. Photoshop, the most popular. So, what's the difference? Oh, yeah. I really like its vector. It's raster. What's the idea? You know, when you have some raster image, it's like you have some canvas like this, and you have pixels. Let's imagine that we have very big pixels. And it's like your program is saving the information about each pixel. Like pixel first is colored with green. Pixel first 2 is colored with blue, for example, and creates the entire image. And when you zoom in or zoom out or you stretch this image, you have a loss of quality. Because I will show you. Because pixels are the same, and when zooming something, those pixels are getting bigger just, and you lose the quality. Yeah, something like this. Any images, if you take and zoom really deeply, you can have those small pixels. You will see those small pixels. And they are not editable as vector images. And for vector drawings, your program is not saving every pixel's information, but instead it's saving a kind of mathematical formula of your shape. Like if you draw the circle, it knows that it's circle. It's some object called circle, and it has some characteristics of how to build circle, and it has some radius, for example, because it needs some radius to build circle. And if you make this circle bigger, it just recalculates the size of your circle in bigger area with bigger radius, for example. And you don't have any quality loss. So that's why in the design, if we are not using photos, we are using, for example, for icons, vector icons, because we can stretch them, make bigger, smaller, we can redo them, we can recreate them, we can change small thing in this vector, and it's much more like customized by us. So why I explained this? Yeah, I wanted to show you these resources. Yeah, for example, you want to download this icon, and you have different possibilities. Oh, I wanted to write popular extensions of vector images and raster images to differentiate. So vector, it's SVG. It's a kind of universal vector extension. AI is Adobe Illustrator extension, and it's vector. What's called? Yeah, CDR. CDR is for Corel. I don't like Corel. That's why I don't remember. But it's not good to send to someone those extensions because maybe they are using some another program. That's why we are using SVG, or even there exist vector PDFs. Did you know? And PDF can be vector format, and sometimes it's quite useful, and I hope you will use it in the future. But that sometimes when we have some PDF and we want to edit and we are not able to edit it, if it's vector, if it's made with some vector program, it's editable sometimes, and you can try always and have the possibility to edit. So for raster images like JPG, PNG, and many like extensions can be raster images, but they are images and they are not editable. Don't think that PSD, which is Photoshop file extension, is raster. Photoshop is raster program, but PSD is actually project extension. If you want to open the project in PSD and edit this project, but you are not able to edit those extensions, and you are able to edit all those.
And the raster have the PDF support?
Yes, have. Like PDF can be raster or vector, but as PDF is really popular and it's like you can open it like book, sometimes we prefer to export our designs in PDFs, and they are editable as well, and they can be explored with like book or like poster as well, and it's quite useful because for SVGs it's not like that. If we have many pages in our design, in PDF it can be explored more comfortably than in SVG, but you should definitely know that if you have possibility to download from somewhere SVG file, it means that it's vector and it's editable file, and even if you don't edit it and you put it in somewhere in your presentation or in your design file and you stretch it, you will not lose the quality and you will use it really good. Like. SVG for sure, because PNG is raster. When you have PNG image, you can't do anything to it. It's like image and that's it. And I will show you, for example, SVG in Illustrator. Sorry, am I late? A bit. Okay. So I will just show you SVG and we'll let you go and you will explore those resources yourself. So as you know about vectors, maybe you can leave if you're hurry. Okay. So I wanted to open some vector image and show you how to edit it. Yeah. For example, this is one color Instagram icon, and this is SVG. And you can really make it bigger. You will, like, it's not possible to lose the quality here because it just recalculates. But if you know how to use pen tool, even you are able to, for example, you are able to remove this at all and to even do something like this. And it's like drawing something yourself and you are able to edit it. And it's really easy to edit. Maybe it's not easy to draw with pen tool, but it's easy to edit. So that's why you, even if you don't use the graphic programs and you are not master in editing vector images, it's better to use vector images in your even presentations because they will always look good and they will not have this effect of seeing pixels and really bad quality and bad image. So I will share with you this presentation. Thank you for listening. If some of you have time and some questions, maybe I will respond, but you can write me somewhere and I will ask you all questions. Thank you.